All right, once again, let's return to this. Now, all I did was I used my 4H pencil and I put a layer over this entire area. I put a layer of value over this entire area, and I just went ahead and spent a little bit of time redrawing some of these lines just to clean those up a little bit. So we're starting to see some of this cube up here. I think it's time. Again, I've cleaned these up so I can put in the cast shadow, and now again I'm gonna try to go kind of, there's a side to side, but I'm really actually going a little bit at an angle as opposed to going straight, and that's because I'm reaching across here. But for right now, we're going to, and I'm using an elbow swing with a tripod grip. And again, I'm just trying to put a little bit of, some people call this a wash, but I'm always like, that's for watercolor. All we're doing is we're putting down a tone, which would be the more accurate description. We don't have a brush filled with water. You can actually put washes in with graphite, with water-soluble graphite, or even normal graphite is actually water-soluble if you have it ground into powder. But I'm not really, I'm just kind of putting down a little bit of our, because this is a white tablecloth, but it's going to have a little bit of a gradation. There's going to be a little bit of a value, a little bit of a tone to it. And so I'm actually going to bring this value back to the back of the table here. So this is the lightest value. This is not, this is not the cast shadow just yet. This is the value of this white table, that even though it's white, it's going to have a little bit of value to it. Again, I'm using a 4H pencil, using a elbow swing in which to do this. Holding this in sort of a modified tripod, I've actually let the pencil come out of the crook of my hand because I went a little looser. If you try to, again, if you're roughing this in, you try to control it too hard, you'll make, I've got a couple little lines, again, because I was trying to press the pencil a little bit instead of just letting it float over the surface. And this is so soft, it's probably not even, it may not pick up on the camera. Our eyes can see better than any camera, and so, in person you can see a whole lot of subtlety that's just going to be lost, and a lot of detail is going to be lost to the camera. But again, I'm just trying to put a very light tone, so there's no place with pure white paper, right? We're just trying to make sure that there is no place that has pure white paper. And that's what I'm talking about when I was talking about snow. You're going to have to put some value in snow, because otherwise snow is just bright white. Even the shadows will blow out, and it won't even look like there's anything there. I mean, little things, but I mean, but you'll get the shadows go really dark, and then the lights get all blown out, and it really doesn't have a whole lot of detail, doesn't really have a whole lot of the form shadows, and so it looks flat. And so, what you'll do is you play with the exposure, and it darkens everything a little bit, and that way you can see detail in the lights, and you can see the half tones and or the middle values. Half tones, middle values are the same, they mean the same thing. So I'm going to grab my HB pencil, and now we're actually going to start putting in the cast shadow. Again, I'm using a HB pencil. Now I'm going to use this just at the very beginning. Shadows will start to have, as they move out, will start to blur out. And so what I'm doing is I'm starting with a lighter pencil with a lighter touch, and then I'll bring in a darker pencil, and this little bit that I'm doing right now will be the part as it's transitioning and disappearing. Okay. All right. So again, now I haven't gotten this as dark as it needs to go, so I'm not going to fiddle with or mess with or overwork the cast shadow too much or work too much into the cast shadow just yet. But when we're talking about form shadows, we should have mentioned that cast shadows, which is just blocking the light, so we don't call them form shadows, they're just the object blocking the light. But that if all things are equal, so this is a white cube, this is a white table, similar or same value, in this case the same, cast shadows are always darker than form shadows. So as I'm creating these, I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind, that there's going to be a point at which I'm going to darken this darker than this dark plane on the cube. For right now, I just want to address it, as we might say. I want to just make sure that I've got the shape worked out for that cast shadow. Again, it's completely blown out. It's not the right value just yet, but that's not what I'm worried about. So I'm going to go into this shadow side. Again, we put a layer of 4H value here, a layer of 4H value there. We kind of cleaned up the edges a little bit. Now, where objects touch, we'll just talk about this real quick, because I think we're going to darken this just a tiny bit. Where objects touch, that's the darkest part of your drawing. So when two things come together, like your fingers, it'll cause a line. Where the little cuticle touches the nail, it's curling down and they're touching together, that it causes a line. It's called an occlusion shadow. And it's when two things touch. So if you're drawing a portrait, that line between the lips, their mouth is closed, is an occlusion shadow. As we age and we start to get, these folds of our skin begin to pucker and then touch, we get lines and or wrinkles. So those are occlusion shadows. They're going to be, again, some of the darkest. They should be darker than even the cast shadow. So where this white cloth touches that cube, there's going to be a line, because that's the edge touching the table. On this side, it's going to be even darker because it's in the shadows. And again, it's going to be one of the darkest places, and it's called the occlusion shadow. So the occlusion shadow really gives you the feeling that something is touching another surface. If I didn't have this line, this isn't just a line. So if anyone's like, well, what's the deal with the line? It's not a line, it's an occlusion shadow. And if I didn't have one, this would feel like this was floating in the air just above the surface of the table. So by putting in the occlusion shadow, it anchors it. It says, hey, that's actually on the table. It's actually touching. Okay? So again, I've talked about how drawing is learning to understand what we see. Well, occlusion shadows are where objects touch. It's very important. So the next part of this, I'm going to start to incorporate, I'm going to use a shield, a piece of paper, to protect parts of the drawing. So I'm going to put this down that I can rest my hand on. And I'm going to come in here and work in the shadow side of this cube. Okay, so again, and what happens is it gets darker in this corner, and then it's going to get lighter, and then it'll get darker again. And that's from reflected light hitting here and reflecting up into there, makes it a little bit lighter. So whenever you look at a cube, if you start looking at the corner that is where the first corner that goes into dark, it's going to be the darkest. And in fact, and then as it comes down, and it's also darker on the edge, and so you'll see this little triangle, and then diagonally, if the light is like this, and usually it's going to be kind of 90 degrees to this is how it will darken, but it'll be darker in this corner, and then there's going to be a gradation of this getting lighter as it comes out. Now what I'm using is a 2H pencil. I think this is getting too dark too quick, so I'm going to grab my 4H pencil and use this one instead. But again, by doing this, we're going to start to get a real feeling of depth on our cube, because again, we're going to have all those different form shadows. We have light, medium, and dark, and then in the darks we're going to have reflected light. Okay, so I'm using this 4H pencil, starting here at the edge where the shadow and the light meet, and then I'm bringing it down a little bit, bring it down a little bit more. We're making gradations. This is actually to the part where we're actually going to start. So before we were just kind of coloring things in sort of flat. But now we're going to start at the darkest part and come out a little bit. Start at the darkest part, come out a little further. Start at the darkest part, come out a little further. This should sound familiar. This is what we're supposed to be doing. Now I made this edge too dark. I can tell you that right now. And if I leave it that way, it's going to look like a cartoon. Whenever we have a dark edge or a dark line around everything, it's just going to have a cartoony sort of look. I think I'll go back to that 2H. I think it needs to be darker, far darker than what this 4H is doing. So we're going to bring the 2H back. And I'm going to start again trying to make a gradation. And again, it's going to, we're doing just little edges. I'm going to have to seam these together at some point. But this is where it gets darker in this corner. Start at the corner, come out a little ways. Start at the corner, come out a little ways. Start at the corner. So again, we're just doing the same thing that we were doing before. Start at the darkest part, come out a little further still. Start at the darkest part, come out a little further still. And again, we're going to go ahead and again, we're going to bump the contrast. So if I was looking at a cube and it was all white, the darkest dark might be a step 5 on the value scale. We're going to drop it down probably to, the darkest dark might be a step 3. So that we get, again, a little more contrast. I'm already, as an artist, thinking, hey, what can I do to make this look better? To give it more drama, to give it more interest, to give it more contrast. You're constantly looking and asking yourself, what can I do to make this look better? And remember, always beware, because again, you want to stay positive, obviously. You want to have, and so, you want to give yourself, positive feedback. All right, welcome back. So we had the camera kind of turned off in the middle of what I was saying before. So we got that taken care of. And I wanted to kind of pick up where I left off, and that is we were talking about you got to be careful when you're about that self-talk. And what I was trying to say is that it's, you do want to tell yourself, hey, hang in there and keep at it. But what I was trying to say is watch out because we desperately, many times we'll want something to look good because we've worked on it. And again, I'm just using a 2H pencil. I've got a tripod grip. I'm going to be using a finger swing. But we want to do, we want it to look good. And so sometimes we'll again start talking ourselves and, oh yeah, it looks great. Oh yeah, it looks great. Yeah, you're doing good. You're doing good. That's good. What you don't want to do is start to, if you're not careful, you can start to convince yourself that you're doing a better job than you may be doing. So don't be afraid to also tell yourself, oh, keep going. This is looking good. But also don't be afraid, oh, this could look better if I did this, or this could look better if I did that. You certainly want to be able to detect what needs to be improved and get it taken care of. Now, so that's just something we have to be cautious of. Like again, you certainly want to hang in there and keep it up and do all that good stuff, but at the same time, you don't want to be missing stuff because you're trying to you talk yourself into believing something that may not or may not be the case. And this is something, because we work so much time on stuff, this is something we all have to be kind of careful of. And I've even, I've had this happen myself. I've had a project that had to get done. This project decided whether or not I would eat that month or make my rent or something important like that. And it would be like 2:30 or 3 in the morning, and I'd be like, oh, I'm killing it. And this is looking so great. And I'm doing a great job. And this is going to be so wonderful. And I would then go and get a little bit of sleep and then come back and then realize that I probably should have gone to bed and not stayed up, because I wasn't working. It wasn't the best thing ever. It was the fact that I was sleep deprived and I was so desperate. I was talking to myself into believing something that actually wasn't the case. And so in times like that, there was a couple times I learned this the hard way. There's times you just have to go, nope, I'm going to bed. And I need to let this lie. I need a fresh eye. I've been working on it for too long. And so it's something that's unique to art, is we work on stuff for so long, and that sometimes, again, we lose our ability to really tell whether it's any good or not. And so I'd come back in the morning and go, oh man, and I'd have to go ahead and take a couple hours to correct the mistakes that I wasn't catching the night before. So that's just something we want to be careful of as we are creating, and it's something that happens to everybody. Now, does that mean it has that it has to be some sort of extreme sort of thing where it's like, oh, whether you eat or not is all dependent on this one little drawing you're painting? No, but it's an idea that it happens to everybody. Even being a professional and having been a professional for years, I've been in situations where that still will happen. I've gotten to the point where I'm smart enough where I go, look, if I'm even a little bit, if I've been working on something too long, that's the other thing. When you start going too long, again, you start to kind of lose your ability to see it rationally. And it never helps the painting. It just always hurts it, or the drawing, as the case may be. It always hurts you in the long run. And so you just want to always sort of keep, be aware of what needs improving as much as possible. And it's better to take, usually you can't do anything in a drawing in under really 2 hours. But if you spend something where you're spending like a stretch at like 6 hours on a drawing and you haven't had like much of a break, do yourself a favor, go take a break for about half an hour, maybe an hour, do something else, then come back. And it's amazing how differently you'll see something. That's something that's very unique to the drawing experience, because of the lengths of time that it takes to create something. And again, it's something that everyone has to watch out for. And you'll understand what I mean once you start drawing. But sometimes it's not even, sometimes in the beginning we just don't want to tell ourselves that we've done something wrong. We just, oh no, that's fine. Oh no, that's fine. That looks great. No, that's fine. That looks great. And there's times it does look great. There's other times it just doesn't. And so we have to make sure that we're as aware as we possibly can be. So I'm using this again. I'm using I'm doing a feathered stroke, only making my stroke on the downstroke, and I'm actually trying to now go the direction of the plane so I can start to do gradations. And I'm also trying to fill in and soften. I think you saw me grab the eraser, and I'm going to do it again. There's this little line through here that's kind of weird, this pattern. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a little beak on here. And I'm going to get in here, and I'm just going to touch that to the surface to pull up just a little bit of the graphite. Not to white. I'm just trying to slightly lighten it. And that way I can go ahead and get this to be more uniform. Now this cube that we got here is pretty much life size. It's like a 3.5 by 3.5, or almost a 4-inch by 4-inch cube. So it's pretty much a life-size, still life sort of a cube that you might see in a still life or what have you. And again, we're just trying to get some of some gradations. Now, when you're drawing this, just like when we look for values, when we're creating values, sometimes we'll take our eyes out of focus, so we aren't being distracted by all the little nuancy stuff, so we can see the patches of stuff. Like if I take my eyes out of focus, I can see there's a patch here and a patch here that's not quite right, a patch up here, a patch here. It's when you soften your eyes, you see more of the basic relationships. When you put your eyes into focus, you actually see more of the general relationships, but more of the details. And so again, while we're creating value, and especially in this where we've put down a layer, then we've gone over it with another layer, and this is probably our third or fourth time. And in the shadows, you're going to actually go over them and over them, the shadows more and more than you would in the lights. The other thing that this does, remember, is this is our H pencils. This is a 2H that I'm using. Again, I'm using a tapered stroke or feathered stroke or gradated stroke, whichever one you want to use. But the reason I'm doing this is I'm trying to get in here and I'm trying to fill in, and we're trying to get better gradations, but we're also trying to fill in some of that texture that the softer pencils leave, because the softer pencils kind of ride on top of the texture of the paper, so they reveal more of the paper texture. And the H pencils, just because they're harder, they get deeper into the paper texture, and so they hide more of that texture. You can make it much more uniform. So that's the great thing about the H pencils, is that you can use them to make it more uniform. Okay, so I'm gonna now. Sometimes I've got so many different directions that I've used the pencil in so many different directions. I'm going to try to soften those different grain lines because it's just showing all the different directions of the pencil. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to go up and down, top to bottom, and diagonal to diagonal. And by doing that, you can start to, again, get some better, you can, by going all, like I'd come, again, side to side, top to bottom, diagonal this way, diagonal that way, and by going every different direction, you kind of cancel out all the different, the different directions that the pencil is being used. And it can also really help the texture too. If you're trying to get something really, really smooth, that's not a bad way to work either. And again, we're doing this mostly in the shadows, so we can build up those shadows. And this is still fairly gentle. These are not dark by any stretch of the imagination. What we're trying to really do with this pencil is to even out all the variations that we've got going on with the shadow side of our drawing. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to go ahead and go to the right on the diagonal, going down to the right, the diagonal going down to the right, a diagonal going down to the left, this way and this way. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to do this off camera because real time it's going to take me probably about 20 minutes to fill that in. But it's going to make a substantial difference to the feeling of uniformity on this drawing. And then we'll come back and we'll really just kind of finish this up. So I'm going to mostly use this H pencil for now and do what I said we were going to do, and I'll come back and we'll continue to, develop this drawing. We're getting to a place where we can start to really see that we have, dark, medium, and light. We've got some value here, we've got some value here. But I'm going to work on this and then we'll come back. All right, so we're going to continue on now. I put a layer using this 2H. Actually, I put a layer just going kind of this direction and a little bit going this direction. But what's happened is by doing that, again, I'm using a tripod grip, and I'm actually using my wrist. And the reason we're doing that is, again, I can move a little quicker. But I've got enough, and again, I did a little bit of diagonals this way, a little bit that way, a little bit this way, but mostly it was actually going this direction. But I did layer it a couple times. But the great thing is, once you do that, you actually create a base. So you've got a uniform enough base to then go back in and modify it. So this right here, and I think if I haven't mentioned it, it bears mentioning now. You're going to spend more time in the shadows than you will in the lights, because you have to really build up the shadows. Like, there's no place on here that's really, except for maybe right there, that's darker than a step 5 on the value scale. And again, that's also why you want a value scale. So when I say something like that, you can go, okay, yeah, I've got my value scale. Oh, that's what a 5 is. Or if you're like, well, I've gone ahead and I've memorized that value scale. Well, then you're good. You know where it is. And so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. I think there's a little bit of, I can try to transition this a little bit by coming up to that edge and coming away from the edge. And I'm kind of starting at the edge, and I went out a little ways, and I'm starting at the edge. I'm going to go out a little further, and I'm starting at the edge, I'm coming out a little further. This is just like what we were doing with those gradations. And I just think there needs to be a little softer gradation from that corner. Now, usually this is going to be the shadow side, and the shadow side will be darker, and the wall behind it will pass behind it and be a little lighter. We want that. But it's darkening, and then it's abruptly getting way too light way too quickly. So I'm trying to bring some of this value over this direction. And it'd probably be a little bit going this direction. Again, I've got the tripod grip, but I'm using a wrist swing, essentially. It may look like I'm rocking my hand back and forth. I'm not doing that. I'm actually swinging the wrist like so. I've got a 2H pencil. And again, with just a little bit of work, we're starting to get, again, a much more subtle transition in that corner, which is what we want. Okay, and so I got that a little darker now. This is going to be getting lighter as it comes down here because of reflected light. But there's still a little bit of patchiness down through here in this area. So I'm going to see if I can just fill a little bit of that in. I think that's helping. Okay. On some of the other drawings, I think we're going to bring in some of the woodless pencils, woodless graphite. So they're kind of like the graphite sticks, except they're round. And those are sold where they're about the length of a wooden pencil, except they don't have any wood on them, so it's just a solid shaft of graphite. It usually has a plastic coating on it to give it a little bit more strength, so it doesn't just break apart. But those are really quite nice to, again, cover more area much more quickly. Because we want to get to that base layer, because again, it took me a little bit of time to get here, where we're like, okay, this is where we're really going to start to manipulate this. This is where the fun's really going to start to happen, so to speak. And that is where the fun starts to happen, is once we've got enough of a base that we can then, really start to create our gradations. And I think I've got just enough coming down up here, maybe a little bit more of a gradation through here. Again, wrist swing, tripod grip, 2H pencil. I'm trying to get a gradation from dark to medium to lighter here, but it can't be too light right through there. That's the other thing, that this has to be darker than this over here, which it's not quite. So I'm going to go ahead and put just a layer over the entire middle section of this to drop it down a little bit darker. And I'll look at it again, maybe just one more layer like that. Okay. Okay, now I've actually gone, again, I'll do this without even thinking about it. Like right now, I'm going really fast. And that's because I'm using an elbow swing. And so, you know, I'm jumping through these different types of, you know, swinging through the wrist, swinging through the elbow. If I'm doing something really minute, I might be swinging through the fingers. And we're doing this to try to, again, get this really working, so we don't have, you know, too much patchiness. It starts to look a little bit uniform, starts to look a little bit better. And I think we're getting there. I think we're getting to the point where we can actually quit messing around. So again, I think we've got it where this definitely looks like the, you know, we've got a shadow side to this. And of course we did before too, but some of this is probably going to go just slightly darker, so it won't be a bad thing to have this shadow side. I'm already visualizing that, so I'm already changing this slightly to what I believe will be there. Okay. Gone over with a, again, using that elbow swing. And again, now I think I'll grab an HB pencil as far as that goes, and we're going to go ahead and use this HB pencil, come in here in this corner, because this should be the darkest part. So I'm going to come over here, try to really get this cleaned up a bit, that edge, and maybe darken just this edge a little bit at the top. And I'm going to use a diagonal. Now I'm going to go ahead, I need to move away so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better, so my fingers aren't entirely in the way. But I'm going to use that finger swing Okay. I'm going to come back up into here. I'm going to try to push that again. Now, I also had a light little patch right past the corner. I'm filling that in right now. And again, we're continuing to try to get more of a gradation through here. I think we're doing, you know, it's starting to happen. If I thought my HB pencil wasn't doing enough or darkening things quick enough, I could use that 2B pencil. You always go one pencil either darker or lighter, and if that one's not working for you, go to the next one. That way you'll have a little more control. So I think I want a little darker, darks a little easier, much more quickly, without as many swings of the pencil. And so I'm going to use this 2B for a moment. See how this looks. And I'm using a slight diagonal with a diagonal that leans going down to the lower left. And keep using this, we use this again. I'm thinking, see which one this is. Now this is a woodless pencil, okay? And you could use this instead of the wooded pencils. Usually the woodless are either 2B, they're in the B family, so either 2B or 4B or 6B. Sometimes you'll find an 8B. But again, what they do have is they have a little bit more graphite through here, so there's certain times you can use more of the side of the pencil and cover more area using an elbow swing once again. But I can use a little more. I can use this now I'm using a finger swing because that elbow swing was just a little loose. It looked like I was going to start to make lines instead of a gradation. So again, it's harder to control that elbow swing. That's all right. And again, the reason we do this is we can cover more area much more quickly. So using an elbow swing again, just because I think I need to, this area here I think needs to kind of be this, sort of this diagonal gradation going down. And right now it looks like a line, so I'm going to try to cover this area a little bit with some graphite, see if we can get that to look a little bit more like what I think we want it to be. I want a little bit more control, so I went back to a finger swing. In fact, now I'm doing a gradated stroke or a tapered stroke, only making the stroke on the downstroke. Using that finger swing once again. Taking my eyes out of focus, and I'm looking at this trying to, there's a couple places I probably need to hit with an eraser. But I'm starting to get the basic and general gradations that I'm looking for in my cube. I'm starting to get it, where it's darker a little here. Not quite, it's close, but where we're getting this, coming here to diagonal, getting lighter as it comes down. Again, I'm using that gradated stroke or feathered stroke. All right, so again, we're starting to get some of this gradation happening, which I like. As I come down, I think I'm going to go ahead and go over this area where the highlight just seems still a little too light. So we're going to soften that just a little bit. All right. And I think we're just kind of to the place where I need to get the the eraser out here and just touch up a couple places that I think will really help what we're trying to do here. I think I need a... Now I'm just doing a regular back and forth finger swing. Nothing special about this, so I just want to cover more area. All right, I think that's looking pretty good. So I want to come in here. We don't want to spend like 16 hours on this thing, but I'm going to come in here a little bit and just tap at this little area here that was just a little too dark. And it was in a little, like a little pattern. It looked like one of the Great Lakes or something like that in the United States or something. It just a little island, if you will. Okay, so we just went ahead and tapped on that. That begins to disappear. So I'm tapping really gently. Hopefully you can see this. Try to angle this out so you can see a little bit better. But again, I'm trying to just lighten it just enough so it melts in to the value around it, so it doesn't look like a patchiness. Same thing over here. Tap, just a little bit. Goes a long way. And there's a couple more places where some of this weird stuff is happening. Like there's an edge right through here that's a little strong. So I come in here with, now I've got a blade, so instead of a little tip, I've got more of a blade here. And usually you'll use that on like a flatter area. And I've kind of taken out the whereas again a little bit too flat. That actually went a little bit much, so I'm going to put just a tiny bit back down in there. Okay. So there's little stuff like this again. There's another little line right through here that I'm going to take out. Little line through there I'm going to take out. And there's a little dark little edge right here in that corner that's just a little strong. It needs to be darker here, a little less dark over there. And we're going to go ahead and take that out. Okay. So come on over into here. All right. So I think the dark side of this is looking pretty good as far as that goes. And so we're going to come over here into the cast shadow, I think. And I'm going to use this HB woodless pencil. Now, here's what I want to remember about, a couple things I want to remember about shadows. And these are not form shadows, this is a cast shadow. Remember that I've zoomed in here too far, but so you can't see it. But remember, there's form shadows and cast shadows. Form shadows is how the light moves across an object, and how as that light moves across a certain plane, whether it's a flat plane or a curved plane, it will get lighter or darker. Lighter as it moves closer to the light, darker as it moves further from the light. So that's a form shadow. A cast shadow is just the object blocking the light. And that's what we've got here. So we've got this cast shadow blocking the light. Now the other thing we want to remember about cast shadows is that cast shadows are darker than form shadows. in most cases. So to really make this have a presence, I guess you could say, we could come over here against this edge, because one edge always gets lighter while another edge is getting darker. That's always happening. So I'm going to see for a minute. Now right now this is barely darker than that. And I want to try, and so I want this cast shadow to be darker than the shadow side of the cube because it's a cast shadow. Cast shadows are darker than form shadows. Now because of reflected light and all the different values of different objects and things like local value, and that's how light or dark the object starts out as, you can start to get things that switch. If I've got form shadows on a dark object and its cast shadow is on a lighter object, let's say we had a black cue ball, and that black cue ball is sitting on a white tablecloth. Well, the cast shadow on a white tablecloth is going to be lighter than a form shadow on an object that is black. So it's because of the fact you have this huge jump of contrast that all of a sudden what is dark for a light color or a white, like that tablecloth, is barely, dark enough, is barely the value of maybe just below the highlight. Maybe the light values are that same value as the cast shadow on white is the light value on black. And so that can be very difficult in the beginning to deal with. And that's why if you've ever, one of the hardest things that they'll have you draw in the beginning is like something that has really bright contrast, like a cow, a jersey. Are they called jerseys? I don't think they're jerseys. They're the Holsteins, the ones with the black and white patches. So you have those types of cows that they use for milk a lot, and you can use other cows for milk too, but that's a very common one here in the West. Well, they can be very difficult to draw because they have white and black. And so you have white in shadow and black in light, and which is darker and which is lighter, and it can do some funny things to your brain. And that's why in the beginning drawing, sometimes they'll have someone say, "Hey, draw a zebra," and it's the idea is the same. You have the dark stripes against the lightest light, plus you have form shadows. So you have these dark and white stripes going in and out of the form shadows, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult to draw in the very beginning because you got all this stuff you have to keep in mind, and if you don't, it won't look right. You'll break the form of the zebra, and it will look like this graphic, posterized sort of drawing instead of looking like it has some depth or what have you. So again, I'm just bringing this cast shadow in, and I'm trying to give this cast shadow, make it darker than my darkest value on the planes of this cube, because if all things are equal, this is supposed to be a light cube on a light table, maybe it has a very flat light tablecloth, whatever. But if that's the case, they're both kind of similar values, or in this case they're both white, so let's say they're the same white. But the idea is that an object that has form shadows on it, those form shadows are always lighter than the cast shadows. And so we're trying to deal with that. Now cast shadows also have value to them. They have gradations. The cast shadow is usually going to be darker right next to the object. And then as the cast shadow moves away from the object, it gets lighter. It also will be darker in the front, getting lighter towards the back because of reflected light. Usually those lights, it's reflecting off of something. Sometimes it's reflecting off the cube and then back down into the shadow. but we're going to go ahead and, just keep putting some value down here. Try to get this cast shadow to have a little bit more, because this didn't feel like it was, like it was anchored because the cast shadow was so light. Well, now we've got some value in this cast shadow, so it feels a little less like it's feeling more like it's sitting on a surface now because of what we're doing with the cast shadow. And again, I'm using an elbow swing, I'm using tripod grip, and I'm using this woodless pencil. So using an elbow swing, but now I've changed to kind of a modified baton handhold, and I'm using this to trying to fill in some of the patchiness on this. It's really patchy. It's nice and dark, beautifully dark. We got about the value that I want, but it's a little patchy. So that's okay. That's not the end of the world. Sometimes if people were working in a certain class, I might say, grab a stump, grab a blending tool. Well, we're going to use a different blending tool. We're going to come in here with this 2H pencil, which again really cleans this stuff up. It makes it look more uniform. I can play with edges, like I can leave this edge alone, let that be softer, come a little closer to this edge, so it's a little bit crisper than this over here. And then as it gets really close, I can come over here and go right up to the edge to really crisp that edge off. So it goes from a crisp edge to a semi-soft edge to a really soft edge. And by doing that, you're going to start to make it feel like it will feel more like a shadow, cast shadow, because cast shadows get, their edges are sharpest right where the light and right where that shadow starts off the object. And as it comes off the object, it gets, a little lighter, and the edges get a little softer. So, pretty wild stuff. Again, just by doing this, we have a little bit more depth through here, and it's really starting to happen for us. So, again, I'm not going to bring it all the way out the edge here because I don't want to crisp that up too much. See, a little further from the edge back here again because I don't want to firm up the edge too much. So I'm trying to keep the edges soft. If I want to right to that edge, it would crisp it on off and crisp it out. And I don't want that, not right now. I can do that later. So again, I can use finger swing to get into some of these little areas. This comes back here. You use that H pencil again using a finger swing. This is actually just a regular finger swing. It's not a tapered stroke. It's just scooting the pencil back and forth while the pencil's on the paper. Okay. All right. I'm going to put a layer in here with the 2H just to fill in some of these little gaps. We'll come back and we'll continue to then come into the light values and middle values and finish this up. All right, take care. All right, so welcome back. So we're going to go ahead and just put a layer of value down here and try to pull this together with that 2H pencil a little bit. And we're to the point where, again, we can see we definitely have a light, medium, and dark, have the cast shadow. And again, this is just a generalized, I got a 2H pencil in my hand. This is just a generalized idea of creating, form shadows with definite planes. Lights up here, this would be the lightest. This would be our middle value. This would be our dark tone. This would be reflected light. We're actually going to be, this is, again, just kind of from what should be happening with the light. We also have a highlight here, but the highlight, well, I guess we said this is a white cube, and so the highlight could certainly be as light as the white cube, but unless it's white, it would be a different color. So we're just trying to give a little bit of a gradation here right behind the highlight, just a scotch to just make that highlight a little brighter, which would give it just a little bit more punch, as people would say. The middle value here, we could just go ahead and put just a little bit, again, of a gradation right below the highlight to give it a little bit more of a punch that way. And these are just nuances. Again, these are just very, very subtle sorts of things, but we've gotten to the point again where we have this is darker in the background, we have the light tablecloth, the top is our light value, this is our middle value, there's our highlight, this is our dark tone, this is reflected light. We don't have core shadows on objects that are flat, we just have the flat planes, but light will still travel across a plane. So like this, there might be less light at the back, because the light's supposed to be around the front a little bit. A little less light at the back and more light at the front. Same thing here, we might have a little less light again at the back, so a gradation of value, getting lighter as it comes forward, getting darker a little bit as it goes back. So there's little nuances like that, and again, this is pretty subtle, and we're not going to sit here and detail this, but this is just the basic idea of form shadows wrapping this object that is made up of flat planes. We also have, so we have our 5. This is light tone, middle value, highlight, dark tone, reflected light. There's our 5. We also have cast shadow, which we said was a little different. And then we also have our occlusion shadows. That's where the object touches, so that's what this dark is here. Usually occlusion shadows, they'll talk about it in the family of the cast shadows, because it's a shadow where two things come together and you can't see very much light under there. So again, occlusion shadows. And so I guess you'd say in all, we'd say, well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 elements to think about. And through doing that, we're going to have something that starts to create an illusion of depth that's going to start to feel like it has, 3 dimensions to it. And we're just going to go ahead and we're going to talk about, we're going to do the last 2 different volumes. We're going to do a little bit with the cylinder, and we've also got the cone and the sphere and all that good stuff in the pyramid. And then we'll finish off the class with a little still life, using these concepts, using basic forms. And we'll talk about some shortcuts we can use to make it a little quicker to create the drawing. So again, we're going to come back now. I hope you enjoyed this. And again, try to sit down and create a small drawing of the cube using your 5 pencils. And yeah, enjoy. Take care now. Bye-bye.